Captain Robert Mitchell walked around his Boeing 777 aircraft, his fingers trailing along its smooth metal surface. After 20 years of flying, this pre-flight check was as natural as breathing. The early morning air at Kuala Lumpur International Airport felt heavy with humidity, and the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of purple and orange. "All systems are good to go, Captain." First Officer Lisa Thompson called from the cockpit door. Her blonde hair was neatly tucked under her cap, and her uniform looked crisp despite the muggy weather. "Weather report shows clear skies all the way to Beijing." Robert nodded and climbed the stairs into the aircraft. As he settled into his seat, he noticed a man in a rumpled suit rushing through first class, clutching a worn leather briefcase. The passenger's ID card hanging from his neck identified him as Dr. James Walker. "Last-minute addition," Lisa explained, handing him the updated passenger list. "Some kind of scientist coming back from a conference. Added to the manifest just an hour ago." The pre-flight checklist went smoothly. 239 souls on board, full fuel tanks, perfect weather conditions. Flight 370 was ready for its 6-hour journey to Beijing. At 12:41 a.m. local time, Robert's voice crackled over the radio. "Malaysia 370, ready for takeoff." The massive aircraft lifted smoothly into the night sky, its powerful engines pushing against gravity until they reached their cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The cabin lights dimmed, allowing passengers to rest during the overnight flight. 2 hours into the journey, Robert was taking a sip of his coffee when he noticed something odd on his instruments. The compass was spinning slowly, making lazy circles like a broken toy. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" he asked, tapping the glass face of the compass. "Yeah, and look at this." She pointed to the electronic displays, which were showing strange readings. The altitude indicator flickered between numbers that made no sense. One moment showing their correct height, the next showing impossibly high figures. Robert reached for the radio to contact air traffic control. His hand froze halfway there as a soft blue light filled the cockpit. It wasn't coming from any of their instruments. Instead, it seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, like they were flying through liquid light. "My God," Lisa whispered, pressing her face against the window. "Robert, look outside." The stars had disappeared. In their place was a curtain of shifting blue energy, rippling like waves on a beach. The light pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. In the passenger cabin, Dr. Walker stared at his briefcase with wide eyes. Inside, his research equipment was going haywire, the screens showing readings that should have been impossible. He knew what this meant. He'd seen these patterns in the lab just days ago, but never at this scale. The plane's engines continued to hum normally, but every electronic device in the aircraft began to act strangely. Phones displayed impossible times. Tablets showed coordinates that didn't exist, and watches ran backward and forward at random. Robert grabbed the radio, fighting down his rising panic. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Malaysia 370. We are experiencing." He never finished the sentence. The blue light suddenly intensified, becoming so bright that it hurt to look at. Then, just as quickly, it vanished, taking Flight 370 with it. On radar screens across Southeast Asia, the plane's signal blinked out like a candle being snuffed. In the span of 1 second to the next, 239 people simply ceased to exist in our dimension. The last recorded position of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was over the South China Sea. In the years that would follow, it would become the greatest aviation mystery in history. But the truth was far stranger than anyone could have imagined. The passengers and crew weren't dead. They were just no longer in this universe. And in the darkness between dimensions, Captain Robert Mitchell's coffee cup continued to float in midair, defying the laws of physics as the aircraft began its journey into the impossible. Colonel Amanda Carter stood at the window of her temporary office in Kuala Lumpur, watching military aircraft take off into the morning sun. 3 weeks had passed since Flight 370's disappearance, and the search area now covered most of the Indian Ocean. Dark circles under her eyes showed the toll of working 20-hour days. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Peter Davis called from the doorway. "The Australian search team found something." Amanda turned quickly. "Show me." In the operations room, dozens of screens showed different search areas. Peter pointed to one showing a piece of metal floating in dark water. "They pulled it up 10 minutes ago. It's definitely from a 777. But—" He hesitated. "But what?" Amanda asked. "The metal's wrong." He handed her the preliminary report. "The lab says it's been exposed to temperatures that would melt any known aircraft material. But instead of melting, it just changed." Amanda picked up the piece of debris in her gloved hands. The metal felt strange, almost alive under her fingers. Its surface showed swirling patterns that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. "There's something else," Peter said, lowering his voice. "The satellite data from the night of the disappearance. We found anomalies that nobody can explain." He pulled up a video on his tablet. The infrared footage showed a massive, perfect circle of cold temperature appearing in the atmosphere, lasting exactly 3.7 seconds before disappearing. The timestamp matched the moment Flight 370 vanished from radar. "What could cause this?" Amanda asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Nothing we know of," Peter replied. "And here's the really strange part. We've found similar temperature circles in old satellite data, going back decades. They appear randomly across the planet, always the same size, always lasting 3.7 seconds. Amanda's phone buzzed. A text from her contact at NASA showed more disturbing news. The space station had recorded a burst of unknown radiation at the exact moment and location where Flight 370 disappeared. Later that afternoon, Amanda met with Dr. Rachel Miller, a physicist from MIT who had been studying the debris. The scientist's usual calm demeanor was shaken. "The metal's atomic structure is impossible," Rachel explained, pointing to a microscope image. "It's like it was exposed to forces that don't exist on Earth. And look at this." She showed Amanda a video of the debris under ultraviolet light. The metal glowed with faint blue patterns, the same color described in the last radar contact with Flight 370. "Could this be from a crash?" Amanda asked. Rachel shook her head. "Colonel, I don't think this plane crashed. The evidence suggests something far more unusual. These energy signatures match theoretical models for spatial distortions, what some scientists call dimensional portals." Amanda stared at her. "You're saying?" "I'm saying this plane might have gone somewhere else. Not down, not up, but through." That evening, as Amanda reviewed the day's search data, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The debris they were finding wasn't scattered randomly. When mapped in 3 dimensions, the pieces formed a perfect spiral, as if the plane had been pulled into a giant whirlpool in the sky. Her computer chimed with a new message. The U.S. military's underwater sensors had picked up a signal, not from the black boxes, but something else. A repeated pattern of sounds that couldn't have been made by any known sea creature or human device. Amanda walked to the large map on her wall, tracking all the search activities with different colored pins. She stepped back and gasped. The search areas, when connected, formed the same swirling pattern they'd found on the strange metal debris. As she stared at the map, her satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed a restricted number. "Colonel Carter," a deep voice said. "This is Kevin Foster from the NSA. We need to talk about Dr. James Walker, one of the passengers on Flight 370. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Are you somewhere private?" Amanda looked out her window at the setting sun, watching another search aircraft return from its mission. "Yes," she replied, her hand tightening on the phone. "Tell me everything." The truth, she would soon learn, was more extraordinary than she could have imagined. Dr. Michael Reynolds hadn't left the SETI laboratory in 3 days. Empty coffee cups littered his desk, and his computer screens glowed with endless streams of data. As one of the top researchers at the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence program, he had analyzed thousands of space signals, but nothing like this. The pattern had first appeared 6 months ago, a series of radio bursts coming from somewhere between Earth and Mars. Most of his colleagues dismissed it as space noise, but Michael saw something different. The signals repeated every 370 minutes exactly. Still chasing ghosts, Mike? Tom Burton, his research assistant, asked as he brought in another cup of coffee. Michael pointed to his main screen. Look at this pattern. It's not random. These signals are encoded with something. He pulled up another window. And here's the weird part. They contain fragments of digital code that match aviation standards. Tom leaned closer. What kind of aviation standards? Black box specifications from a Boeing 777. The room went quiet. Everyone knew about Flight 370. It had been 3 years since its disappearance. Michael typed rapidly on his keyboard, bringing up more data streams. Yesterday, I ran the signals through a new decoding program, he said. Look what came out. He pressed enter, and numbers filled the screen. Tom's eyes widened. Are those flight recorder readings? Yes, but here's where it gets impossible. Michael scrolled through the data. The timestamps. According to this black box data, the plane is still recording. And these timestamps. He pointed to the numbers. They're from the year 2291. Before Tom could respond, one of their radio dishes picked up a new signal. This one was stronger than the others, and it made their equipment buzz with energy. Michael quickly started recording. As they watched, the random patterns on the screen began to form into something else. Letters. Words. We are alive. Help US. Michael's hands shook as he typed a response using the same frequency. Who are you? The answer came back almost instantly. Flight 370. Captain HFY. Time different here. Need QUANTUBUM frequency 2.47 Gs. Get Colonel Carter on the phone, Michael said to Tom, his voice urgent. Now. Within hours, the lab was filled with military personnel and government scientists. They brought in specialized equipment that Michael had never seen before. Colonel Carter arrived with a team of quantum physicists, including a woman who seemed to know exactly what to do with the strange frequency Captain Mitchell had requested. It's a quantum entanglement channel, Dr. Rachel Miller explained as she set up her equipment. We've been developing this technology in secret, but we've never achieved stable communication. She looked at Michael. Your signal might have just given us the key we need. They worked through the night, adjusting frequencies and strengthening the signal. At 3:47 a.m., the room fell silent as a clear voice came through their speakers. This is Captain Robert Mitchell of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, the voice said. Static crackled between words. We are alive and safe, but we're not in our own dimension anymore. The passengers are here with me. Dr. Walker says we've crossed a breach in space-time. Colonel Carter stepped forward. Captain Mitchell, this is Colonel Amanda Carter. Can you describe your location? We're in some kind of structure, Mitchell replied. It's massive, like a space station, but it wasn't built by humans. The technology here, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. And we're not alone. There are others here, people and vessels that disappeared throughout history. The signal began to fade. Mitchell's voice became urgent. Listen carefully. The portal appears in cycles. Dr. Walker has been studying it. We can come back, but we need your help. We need you too. The transmission cut off. The room erupted in activity as technicians tried to restore the signal, but Michael sat still, staring at his screens. After 3 years of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, he had found something far more extraordinary, proof that human beings could survive in another dimension. And somewhere, beyond the boundaries of our universe, 239 people were waiting to come home. Kevin Foster walked through the underground levels of the NSA building, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. After 20 years as an analyst, he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. The file in his hands was marked Project Gateway, top secret. Inside were documents about Dr. James Walker's work, dating back 10 years before Flight 370's disappearance. As he entered the secure conference room, he found Colonel Carter and Dr. Reynolds already waiting. "What I'm about to show you never leaves this room," Kevin said, placing the file on the table. He pulled out a series of photographs. These were taken in 1943, 1977, 1995, and 2013. Different locations, different times, but look at the sky in each one. The photos showed the same strange blue light that Flight 370 had reported before vanishing. Each incident had resulted in disappearances, ships, planes, even entire research stations in Antarctica. Dr. Walker wasn't just any scientist, Kevin continued. He led a secret government program studying these events. They called them dimensional bridges, natural tears in the fabric of space-time. He played a video on his laptop. It showed Dr. Walker giving a presentation 3 days before boarding Flight 370. "We've mapped the patterns," Walker said in the video. "These portals appear in cycles, following Earth's magnetic fields. They're not random. They're like cosmic tide tables. We can predict them." Colonel Carter leaned forward. "Are you saying Walker knew this might happen?" Kevin shook his head. "No, but he recognized what was happening when it began. Look at this." He showed them Walker's last text message, sent moments before the plane vanished. "It's real. God help us. It's actually real." Dr. Reynolds spread out his signal data on the table. The timing matches. Every signal we've received comes exactly when one of these bridges is at its strongest. "There's more," Kevin said. He pulled out more documents. In 1976, a Soviet research vessel disappeared in the Pacific. Before it vanished, they recorded something remarkable: mathematical equations carved into ancient underwater ruins. The same equations that described these dimensional bridges. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Someone's been studying these portals for a very long time," Colonel Carter said quietly. "Long before humans existed." Kevin nodded. Dr. Walker believed these bridges weren't natural at all. They were created millions of years ago by someone or something that understood dimensional travel. Flight 370 didn't just get lost. It found one of their gateways. Dr. Reynolds pulled up his latest signal analysis. That explains the structure they're in. It's not just a building. It's a waypoint, a cosmic rest stop between dimensions. "But why hasn't anyone come back?" Colonel Carter asked. Kevin opened another file. "Because the return journey is incredibly complex. Wrong timing, wrong approach angle, wrong speed. Any mistake would scatter them across dimensions." Walker's team calculated that the chance of accidentally making it back was less than 1 in a billion. He showed them Walker's final research notes, but they also proved something else. With the right calculations and enough power, we could open one of these bridges ourselves. Colonel Carter stood up, walking to the window. "So what you're saying is, we can bring them home," Kevin finished, "but we'll need help from the other side." That's why Walker was on that flight. He wasn't just a passenger. He was carrying vital research data about the bridges, data that might help them find their way back. Dr. Reynolds checked his watch. "The next signal window opens in 6 hours. If Captain Mitchell can get to their communication system, then we can start working on a rescue plan," Colonel Carter said. She turned to face them. "But we need to move fast. According to these documents, the bridges are becoming unstable. In less than a month, they'll start collapsing." Kevin gathered the files. 239 lives depend on us figuring this out. And we're not just racing against time. We're racing against the collapse of reality itself. As they left the room, Kevin looked one last time at Walker's final message. Below the text was a hastily drawn symbol, the same symbol that had been found in those ancient underwater ruins. The truth about Flight 370 was far older than anyone had imagined, and it was about to change everything they thought they knew about human history. Captain Robert Mitchell stood at the window of what they now called the hub, looking out at the strange purple sky of their new home. After 3 years in this dimension, he still couldn't get used to how the stars moved in spiral patterns. Behind him, the massive room buzzed with activity. The survivors of Flight 370 had turned the alien structure into a functioning community. They used the strange, self-repairing technology they'd found to create homes, gardens, and workshops within the massive station. Captain, First Officer Lisa Thompson called from her workstation. "Dr. Walker needs you in the control room. The quantum communicator is active again." Robert hurried through the curved hallways. The walls glowed with soft blue light, responding to their movement. Even after all this time, they were still discovering new things about this place. In the control room, Dr. Walker sat surrounded by alien screens that floated in the air. His hair had grown long, and his suit had been replaced by clothing made from synthesized materials they'd learned to create. "Earth is ready," Walker said, looking up from a screen showing Dr. Reynolds' face. "They figured out how to strengthen the quantum link. We can talk in real time now." "This is Colonel Carter." A clear voice came through their speakers. "We're receiving you at full strength. Can you tell us more about your situation?" Robert took a deep breath. "All passengers are alive and healthy. The station provides everything we need: food, water, air. It's like it was designed to keep human beings alive." He paused. "But we're not the first ones here." He nodded to Lisa, who pulled up images on the floating screens. 2 weeks after we arrived, we found other survivors. Remember Amelia Earhart? She's here. Her plane appeared in 1937. And she's not alone." The control room fell silent as Lisa showed more images. The U.S. Cyclops, a Navy cargo ship that vanished in 1918. A Japanese fishing boat from 1962. A Soviet research team from 1976. All of them had been pulled through dimensional bridges over the years. "The station preserved them," Dr. Walker explained. "Time moves differently here. A day for us is like a minute on Earth. That's why Amelia hasn't aged since 1937. There are over 1,000 people here now, from different times and places." "But why?" Colonel Carter's voice asked. "Who built this place?" "We call them the architects," Lisa said. She pulled up designs they'd found in the station's database. They were an ancient race that mastered dimensional travel millions of years ago. They built these waypoints across the universe as safe harbors for travelers. "Or for refugees," Robert added. "We think they were running from something. The station's archives show them searching for safe dimensions, mapping routes between universes." Dr. Reynolds' voice came through next. "The dimensional bridges are becoming unstable. We have less than a month before they collapse completely. Have you found a way back?" "Maybe," Dr. Walker said. He showed them a massive ring structure at the edge of the station. "This is a gateway generator. The architects used it to control the bridges. We've been studying it, learning how it works. With Earth's help, we might be able to activate it. But there's a problem," Lisa added. "The power source is failing. That's why the bridges are collapsing. We need to act fast." Robert looked at the faces of his passengers working around the station. Children who had grown 3 years older while only 3 days passed on Earth. Elderly passengers who hadn't aged at all. All of them working together, learning impossible things, staying strong despite everything. "We're ready to try," he said into the communicator. "But we need to take everyone. Not just Flight 370's passengers. Everyone we found here. We can't leave them behind." There was a long pause from Earth. Finally, Colonel Carter's voice returned. "Agreed. We'll start preparations immediately. But Captain, there's something else you need to know." Robert watched as new data flowed across their screens. What he saw made his heart stop. The dimensional bridges weren't just collapsing. They were about to tear reality apart. Amelia Earhart's hands moved quickly over the alien control panel as she showed Lisa Thompson how the station's systems worked. Even at 39 years old, the same age she'd been for the past 87 years, her eyes sparkled with the same love for discovery that had made her fly across oceans. The architects built everything in threes, Amelia explained, pointing to the glowing symbols. 3 power sources, 3 backup systems, 3 emergency protocols. Once you understand that, the rest makes sense. Lisa nodded, taking notes on a tablet that modified to interface with the alien technology. After 3 years of working together, the famous pilot had become both her mentor and friend. But why 3? Lisa asked, watching as Amelia opened another section of the station's database. Because they had 3 brains, a voice said behind them. Dr. Walker walked in, carrying what looked like an ancient stone tablet covered in strange markings. Look what we found in the lower archives. He placed the tablet on a scanning surface. The alien computer immediately projected a 3-dimensional image above it, a detailed anatomical diagram of one of the architects. The creature had a triangular head with 3 distinct brain chambers, each one specialized for different types of thinking. They couldn't think like us, Dr. Walker explained. They processed reality in 3 different ways at once. That's how they discovered dimensional travel. They could literally see other dimensions. Amelia pointed to a new set of symbols appearing on the screens. These are navigation charts. They map not just space, but time and dimensional frequency. Each disappearance in history happened when Earth passed through one of these crossing points. Lisa studied the charts. The Bermuda Triangle is a dimensional crossroads, Dr. Walker finished. So is the South China Sea where we disappeared, and a dozen other locations around the world. The architects built their waypoints near each one. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's deep scanning system. Something was happening in the lower levels. A door had opened on its own, revealing a chamber they'd never seen before. Should we check it out? Lisa asked. Amelia was already heading for the elevator. After all this time, you still have to ask. The lower chamber was vast, its walls covered in flowing symbols that told the architect's story. Dr. Walker read them aloud as they walked, translating the alien language they'd spent years learning. They were explorers, like us, he said. They found these dimensional bridges by accident, just like we did. But they also found something else, cracks in reality itself, places where the universe was breaking down. Lisa touched one of the walls, and a holographic display sprang to life. It showed thousands of dimensional bridges connecting different universes, forming a vast network of emergency escape routes. They built the waypoints as shelters, Amelia said quietly, places where people could survive when their dimensions started to collapse. They weren't just exploring. They were trying to save as many lives as possible. Dr. Walker's face went pale as he read more symbols. And now it's happening again. The bridges are breaking down because reality itself is becoming unstable. If we don't fix it, Earth will be the first to go, Lisa finished. That's why the station's power is failing. It's using all its energy trying to hold our dimension together. Amelia walked to the center of the room, where a pedestal rose from the floor. On it sat a small device, triangular in shape, glowing with soft blue light. What is it? Lisa asked. Hope, Amelia replied. She picked up the device carefully. It's a key to the main gateway controls. The architects left it here for whoever found this place. They knew someday someone would need it. Dr. Walker checked his tablet. The next communication window with Earth opens in 10 minutes. We need to tell them what we found. As they hurried back to the control room, Lisa looked at the thousands of survivors going about their daily lives in the station. People from different times, different places, all working together to survive. The architects had brought them here for a reason, not just to save them, but to give humanity a chance to save everyone else. Now they just had to figure out how to use a key that was designed for beings with 3 brains. 3 days before the dimensional bridges would collapse forever, Dr. Walker sat in the station's main control room with Lisa Thompson and Amelia Earhart. They had connected the triangular key to the gateway controls, but nothing happened. "It needs 3 operators," Amelia said, pointing to 3 identical control panels that had risen from the floor. "Just like everything else they built. 3 minds working together." Lisa studied the alien symbols floating above each panel. "These are different. Each one processes a different type of information." She pointed to them one by one. "Space coordinates, time variables, and dimensional frequencies." "Like the 3 brains of the architects," Dr. Walker agreed. He touched his tablet to the nearest panel, and new data flowed across the screens. "Earth scientists have calculated our return window. We'll have one chance, exactly 47 hours from now." The quantum communicator crackled to life. "This is Colonel Carter. Are you receiving us?" "We're here," Lisa responded. "We found the gateway controls, but we need 3 people who can work in perfect sync to operate them." "Like flying a plane," Amelia added. "But instead of pitch, roll, and yaw, we're dealing with space, time, and dimensional phase." Dr. Walker looked at the 2 women. "That's it. We need pilots. People who understand 3-dimensional movement and split-second timing." "I'll take the space coordinates," Amelia said immediately. "After 87 years here, I know every inch of this dimensional space." Lisa nodded. "I'll handle time variables. My work with the station's systems has taught me how time flows differently across dimensions. And I'll manage dimensional frequencies," Dr. Walker said. "My research on Earth was all about mapping these patterns." They spent the next 20 hours practicing with the control systems. The station's computer ran simulations, showing them what would happen if their timing was off by even a fraction of a second. The results were terrifying. People scattered across dimensions, lost forever in the space between spaces. "The human mind wasn't designed for this," Lisa said during a short break. "We're trying to think like beings with 3 brains." Amelia handed her a cup of water. "No, but we were designed to adapt, to work together. Maybe that's why the architects chose this station to survive. They saw something in humanity they recognized in themselves." As they prepared for their final attempt, Captain Mitchell organized the survivors. All 1,273 people would need to board their original vehicles, the planes, ships, and other craft that had brought them here. These vessels had been preserved by the station, protected from the effects of time. "The gateway will lock on to familiar objects from each time period," Dr. Walker explained to Colonel Carter through the quantum link. "It's like a dimensional anchor, helping to guide everyone back to their proper time and place." "But how can you be sure they'll arrive at the right moment?" Carter asked. "The architects thought of that too," Lisa said. "The gateway creates what they called temporal bubbles around each vessel. When they return, only a few minutes will have passed in their original time. As far as history is concerned, they never disappeared at all." The final hours ticked by as everyone took their positions. Flight 370's passengers returned to their seats. Amelia climbed back into her Lockheed Electra. The crew of the U.S. Cyclops manned their stations. Every lost vessel and vehicle was prepared for the journey home. Dr. Walker looked at his companions at the gateway controls. "If we succeed, no one will ever know what really happened. History will remain unchanged. Except for us," Lisa said. "We'll remember." Amelia placed her hands on the control panel, and it lit up with blue light. "Maybe that's enough. Ready?" The other 2 nodded, taking their positions. Above them, the massive gateway ring began to spin, creating a spiral of energy that looked like the night sky in this strange dimension. Colonel Carter's voice came through one last time. "Good luck. The world is waiting for you." Together, they placed their hands on the triangular key. It was time to bring everyone home. The gateway chamber hummed with power as Amelia Earhart, Lisa Thompson, and Dr. Walker synchronized their movements at the control panels. Above them, The massive ring spun faster and faster, creating a swirling vortex of blue energy. Dimensional frequency locked, Dr. Walker called out, his hands dancing over the symbols on his panel. Time variables aligned, Lisa responded, watching as the numbers flowed through her section of the controls. Space coordinates set, Amelia added. Beginning final sequence. In the station's docking area, Captain Robert Mitchell sat in Flight 370's cockpit, his hands steady on the controls. Behind him, 239 passengers waited silently. Similar scenes played out across the station as other vessels prepared for their journey home. Through the quantum communicator, Colonel Carter's voice was clear. All tracking systems are ready. The dimensional bridge will be at maximum stability in 3 minutes. Dr. Walker watched the power readings climb. The station is directing all remaining energy to the gateway. We'll have exactly one chance at this. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across all their screens. The station's AI spoke in its strange, musical language, which they had learned to understand all too well. Reality fractures detected. Lisa translated. The dimensional collapse is accelerating. We have less time than we thought. Amelia's face showed fierce determination. Then we go now. Everyone hold on to something. This is going to be one hell of a ride. Together, they pressed their hands against the triangular key. It began to glow with intense blue light, responding to their combined commands. The gateway ring's spin reached its peak, and the vortex stabilized into a perfect circle of swirling energy. Gateway is open, Dr. Walker shouted over the rising hum. Captain Mitchell, you're first. Take off now. Flight 370 lifted smoothly from its docking bay, just as it had done that night in Kuala Lumpur 3 years, or 3 days, ago. As the plane approached the gateway, the blue energy reached out to wrap around it like a protective cocoon. This is Flight 370. Mitchell's voice came through clearly. We're going in. The plane entered the vortex and vanished in a flash of light. On Earth, radar screens suddenly lit up with a signal. Flight 370 appeared in the night sky over the South China Sea, exactly where it had vanished. Only 20 minutes had passed in Earth time. One by one, the other vessels followed. The U.S. Cyclops sailed through time back to 1918. Amelia's Lockheed Electra would soon lift off, returning to 1937. Each disappearance in history was being undone, the timeline healing itself. But with each passage, the station's power dropped lower. The walls began to flicker, the ancient technology finally reaching its limits. We have to go, Lisa said, looking at her companions. The station can't hold much longer. Dr. Walker shook his head. Someone has to stay to keep the gateway stable until the last vessel is through. The architects designed it this way, a final sacrifice to save everyone else. No, Amelia said firmly. We go together. I didn't wait 87 years to lose my new family now. She typed rapidly on her panel, and new symbols appeared. Look at these readings. The architects left us one last gift. Understanding dawned on Dr. Walker's face. The station itself, it's not just a waypoint. It's a vessel. And we're taking it with us. Lisa finished. She understood now why the architects had built everything in threes, not just for their own use, but for the ones who would come after them. Together, they initiated the final sequence. The entire station began to vibrate as its ancient engines activated for the first time in millions of years. The gateway expanded, growing large enough to encompass the entire structure. Through the quantum link, they heard Colonel Carter's voice one last time. We're detecting a massive energy surge. What's happening? We're bringing back proof, Lisa replied. Humanity's not ready for dimensional travel yet, but someday we will be. The architects left us this technology for a reason. We just had to prove we could work together to use it. The station entered the gateway in a flash of brilliant light. When it emerged, it appeared as a small asteroid in orbit around Earth, invisible to all but the most advanced sensors. Inside, 3 humans began their work, studying the architect's legacy, preparing humanity for what was to come. And somewhere in the vast network of dimensions, in the space between spaces, other gateways waited to be found.